You all have had over 100 chapters to prove yourselves, and there shall be many more to make me change my views. But now the time has come for Knights of the Apocalypse. Thank you to our $5 patrons Redwolf 4765, Midnight Gemlord, and Sean. And thank you to our $3 members Recliner Plays and Redwolf 4765. And a very big thank you to our $25 patron Alex Ice Rose. And another very big thank you to our $25 member Alex Ice Rose. Now, we have this ranking of the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse as characters, specifically as characters, because you know Lance slams because he's the strongest. But ladies and gentlemen, on the list on the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse as characters in the comment section down below. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, make sure you hit that little notification bell so you do not miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do happen to have a Patreon down below where you can support me for as low as $1 a month to get things like exclusive videos, early content, and more. You can also now become a member to the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. Now, let's hop into the ranking. What's up, guys? Pencil here, and yeah, obviously we're only 100 chapters deep into 4 Knights. 7 Deadly Sins was 300 something chapters long, so even being generous and assuming Nakuba never takes a break again and he just uploads every week 4 years straight, we're still gonna get like 4 more years of 4 Knights, 4 more years of these characters, 4 more years of that, and even then that's being a little bit generous. We're probably gonna get like 5 to 7 really. So you may be wondering why I'm ranking these guys so early. Like, dude, we just started. Like, heck, Gawain didn't even join that long ago. The main reason I'm doing this here and now is because I want to have progress. Like, I want to document my opinions on these characters as the series progresses. So when we are 200 chapters deep, I'll probably do another one of these. When we are 300 chapters deep, I'll probably do another one of these. Heck, if we get to 400 chapters, is that possible? Like, I'm seriously wondering, is that possible? But if we get to 400 chapters deep, I do another one of these. Because my opinions have already shifted a couple times on characters and how I feel about them. Nakuba's been doing very good at making my opinions just ping pong all over the place. So I want to have this video as sort of a time capsule. And I want you guys to do the same. Down below, leave your rankings, leave why you have the characters ranked that way, and then a couple years from now, when we are much deeper into the series, see if your opinions stay the same, see if they change. Do that. This is the wonderful thing about having YouTubes, because we can just keep these as essentially time capsules. So let's not waste any more time, and let's hop right into number 4. Yeah. I know. Oh, well, look at Mr. Predictable here. Oh, just because she doesn't have a lot of screen time, you don't like her? Oh, why do you have her at the bottom, Pencil? Oh, you uncultured swine. Yeah, I know. Gawain's my least favorite knight so far, and it's not for lack of trying, all right? First things first, I gotta tackle the most major problem. She's gonna suffer the most from just lack of screen time. Like, heavy lack of screen time. Like, legitimately, we are 102 chapters deep at the time of recording, and she's been introduced, quote-unquote introduced, in chapter 58. She was a cameo in that chapter. Her armor got more screen time than her in that chapter. The real debut of Gawain doesn't take place until a whole 2 chapters later, in chapter 60, where she appears right there at the end. And even then, her introduction, while saucy, was in chapter 60. This series is only 102 chapters long. We've only had a real solid 42 chapters with Gawain. And even in that chapter span, she's really been an active participant in chapters for like maybe a quarter of that, if that. And due to that, she's just going to be lacking relative to her fellow knights. And it'd be like that when it'd be like that sometimes. Unfortunately, I'll feel more connected and interested in characters when, you know, I have more time with said characters. And thusly, Gawain suffers massively on that front. Number 2, Gawain is like, how do I put this? The least interesting out of all of her companions. And I mean this specifically as like a combatant. Notably, she does have an interesting unknown part of her magical kit with her magical kit. She's already shown things like absolute cancel, teleportation, and she's shown uses of these abilities that we haven't seen before. Very specifically with teleportation, the idea to teleport one's weapon into another human being, or, well, another creature at that point, is very, very unique. We have not seen that up to this point, and that's cool. But the other half of her is just sunshine. Alright. And even then, she barely gets to use it. Like, nothing in comparison to her previous holders of sunshine. And while there probably is a narrative reason for that, or a character reason, one of two, that leaves her very uninteresting to watch in battle in comparison to the rest of her people. Like, she's going up against Lance, who is Lance, and that automatically pushes him above on an interesting front in combat with interesting potential. Percy can literally do anything, and Tristan can literally do anything at home. So, like, the competition she has is pretty darn massive, and it doesn't help the fact that she just hasn't had many combat showings. Like, legitimately, who has she fought on screen? Go ahead. Think real hard about it. It's 2 people. She fought 3. 4, if you want to count her versus Percy as a fight. But she lost to Pelgard. She managed to barely kind of defeat Meligaland, even though, not Meligaland, regular Chaos Galland. But even then, she didn't really. It was Percy who came in and body bagged him at the very end. Though, admittedly, I will admit, Percy did, he stole her dub. All right, I'll give her that. She did get her dub stolen. And then she just lost to Meligaland. Like, sure, she used Sunshine Burst on him, but it didn't work. Tristan had to come in and clean up. And then every other fight she's had is non-existent. Sure, she low-diffed the 5 demons off screen, but because it was off screen, I haven't got to see her fight. So, in comparison to her contemporaries, all of which who at least have a single dub to their name, some of which multiple dubs, Gawain has 1 off-screen dub that's all her own, with a kit that is the least interesting to at least me. I can definitely see an argument for Tristan's being less interesting because he literally just has light and darkness, 2 things that we've seen before. But once again, in a similar vein to Gawain, using her 1 magical ability of teleportation in a different way than we've seen others use it, Tristan has been using his magical abilities of just light and darkness in different ways that either we haven't seen or haven't seen that often. And I think that's more interesting, and we'll talk about that when we get to Tristan himself. But with that being the case, Gawain's just kind of stuck out of luck on a combat front. And once again, this sort of bleeds into her initial problem of a lack of screen time. Yeah, of course Gawain hasn't gotten much time to show off, because she literally hasn't gotten much time to show off. The only reason she has 3 battles is because she was only allowed to have 3 battles at 42 chapters. That's not her fault. It's not like she can really do anything about that. The one thing I will admit, though, all of her battles being L's up to this point are kind of embarrassing. And to be fair, it's not necessarily, she didn't lose against Chaos Galland, but she didn't win either. So it's 2 L's and a neutrality. Like, it just doesn't leave much for me to latch onto on a fighting front. And as much as Nakaba will try to trick you and try to say it's a romance manga, yeah, 7 Deadly Sins / 4 Knights, that duology is mainly an action series. So when your action isn't that good, or that interesting, or that numerous, you're going to fall a bit off as a character for me. That's why a lot of characters in 7 Deadly Sins sort of just bloop off the map, off the radar, because they don't fight that much. And or whenever they do fight, they fail at fighting. And thusly, Gawain's sort of in that same boat right now. I definitely see this changing as time goes on. Don't get me wrong. I don't think Nakaba is going to keep sidelining Gawain. But I do believe that if we actually got to see her low-diffing the demons, she may have slid up a spot. Or at least I'd have more positive things to say about her in terms of her fighting record. Because being 0-1 and 2, I guess that'd be like wins, ties, losses, or would you go like wins, losses, tie? If you go win, losses, tie, being 0-2 and 1, not the best at all. And another thing about her L's is that they're kind of embarrassing. Like, don't get me wrong, I get it. She's a 16-year-old girl that grew up in a sheltered environment, but her immediately taking an L to Pelgard with nothing but pure skill and immediately breaking out and bawling, kind of embarrassing. Not gonna lie. Felt a little bit of secondhand embarrassment there. And I don't want to feel secondhand embarrassment when I'm reading a manga I enjoy. Her loss to Meligaland. She did the thing, it didn't work, and she passed out afterwards. Oh, well, okay. Like, once again, not necessarily her fault. Meligaland was just a strong combatant, and she had been fighting all day. So it's not her fault necessarily, but, conking out in the middle of an active battlefield and not even really doing anything of major damage to your opponent, not looking too hot for you. And even her neutrality against Chaos Gallon didn't end too well, because obviously she got blown up by Percy alongside Gallon. So she kind of just gets once again reduced to a sort of gag-esque role at the end of that. So I don't know. At least on a combat front, there's nothing that Gawain has to offer. She doesn't lose gracefully. She doesn't neutrality gracefully. And she doesn't have the most interesting kit to me, or her one unique specification is less interesting than the other unique ways we've seen magics that we've seen before get used. So it's kind of stuck I look on a combat front. And then on a character front, don't get me wrong. I mean, which down atrocious characters do I really like, though? I was about to say, I'm me here or there. I don't mind a down atrocious character or two, but I'm trying to think Meliodas. Meliodas is down atrocious. His whole story is being down atrocious. So is Bond. So yeah, you know what? I do like some down. Heck, King too. Escanor. Every single one of the male characters in Some Deadly Sins was down atrocious for the most part. So I can definitely like down atrocious characters, but Gawain takes it that extra step too far. That it's hey, that's bad. Don't do that. Legitimately, her introduction, her proper introduction, not her just walking by in chapter 58, but her introduction with Isolde, where she sort of just starts, grabbing and touching where she shouldn't be grabbing and touching. Gawain, there is such a thing as consent. I don't know. I know. I'm applying my old-fashioned, well, I guess not old-fashioned, new-fashioned modern-day sensibilities to a story based in a period over 1,000 years ago, I do believe. But even still, it's just not appealing to me. Sure, I'm applying my modern sensibilities to it, and thusly, when I do that, I don't like it. I'm not the biggest fan of it. You can be down atrocious, but heck, even characters who were down atrocious previously, that wasn't why I liked the character. I do not like Meliodas for how down atrocious he was, except when it was literal love. But when Meliodas opens up in chapter 1 and starts, touching and grabbing when he shouldn't be touching and grabbing, that's not good. I don't appreciate that. Same thing with Bond. Same thing with King. Same thing with Escanor. Same thing with any character that's down bad. Legit down abyssal. I'm not a fan of that. It's just not my cup of tea, unfortunately. And unfortunately, that's one of Gawain's most primary and glaring aspects of her character. Unlike Meliodas, where you can sort of argue it to be an aspect, but not a major one, same thing with Bond, especially with King, and especially with Escanor. Think of most of Gawain's most memorable scenes. What are they? They're either her being rude, or down atrocious. There's no in between. At least in my mind, whenever I think of Gawain in her most major moments, I think of her either being arrogant against people she shouldn't be arrogant against, like Galland and like Pelgard and like Meligalland, and or I think of her, staring at Isolde, touching Isolde, sniffing Isolde, staring at Anne, offering things with Anne, being down atrocious. I'm sorry. It's just what comes to mind with the character, because it's been such a major aspect of her. Do I believe this can lead to character development down the line? Yes, of course, absolutely. But at the moment, considering this is such a major part of her character, it's not something that I'm necessarily going to be a fan of. And there's another character on this list that's also pretty down atrocious that I'm also not a fan of when it comes to that being part of their character. So I'm kind of stuck in a rough spot, because her character just generally isn't appealing to me. I can find it funny, but mostly I find it concerning. And another big issue about her character, at least for right now, is that she talks smack, and unlike her predecessor, she can't really back it up. The reason Escanor works so well, in terms of just an absolute monster and a beast talking smack to everybody and anybody, is because 9 out of 10 times, he could usually back it up. He only started to fail to back it up once. And that was against a creature that he wasn't even talking that much smack to, which was the original demon. And meanwhile, his whole introduction, a majority of his run throughout the series, and even after the original demon fight, he talked smack and was about it, and could back it up, which is what believed, or led me to believe, that Naguma would do something similar with Gawain. Sure, she can talk all this smack, but she better be about it. And it seemed like he was going that way, but then she talked a whole bunch of smack to Pelgard, and got smacked by Pelgard. And then she was talking a whole bunch of smack to Galland, and then didn't beat Galland. She didn't talk much smack to Meligalland, but presumably the smack from Galland transferred over to Mela Galland, and she got bodied there too. And then proceeded to use an attack that failed. So she does talk the smack. She got one part of it right. She is very good at trash talk. But even with being very good at trash talk, she can't back it up. So I have a character who on multiple levels is failing. I have a character who has not won a single fight yet, at least on her own, entirely. I have a character who has taken multiple L's. I have a character who has had minimal screen time relative to her peers, even if some of her screen time is barely more or barely less than some of her peers. And I have a character whose moveset, while intriguing in one way, is only intriguing in that one way. And everything else I've seen before and arguably seen better. On multiple occasions in the case of the Sun users. Merlin's a bit unique, but even then. So Gawain's really bringing nothing to the table. Her design is fine. Like, I'm cool with the design. It is legitimately just Merlin and Escanor. It's essentially young Merlin. It is young Merlin, and that's it. It's young Merlin in Escanor cosplay. So the design is something that I'm not even... I mean, it's not like I don't like it. I'm not like it's a bad design. It's even a fun design to draw because, you know, Nagaba's art is just really good. It's simple yet sweet, and thusly, the design is fine to draw. And it's fine appearance-wise, but once again, nothing too crazy relative to her companions. Does she have the worst design out of her companions? No, but that's another video for another time. But with that being the case, Gawain, despite being one of the four knights, the Knight of Famine, she has brought nothing to the table that's really going to push her above any of her peers. At least not in my eyes. Like, I can definitely understand if y'all think I've been too rough on Gawain, but I really feel like I need to justify why she's at the bottom. Because I know a lot of people really, really like Gawain. I've seen the community. I've seen my own comments. Like, I feel like a lot of y'all will not have Gawain at the bottom of this list. You may have her at third, but fourth, I feel like that may be a little bit off-putting, so I want to justify it. I hope I've justified it enough. But just to recap, Gawain has multiple issues that overall make her character less appealing to me than her three other fellow characters. Is she my least favorite character out of the current main cast? No, not even close. But regardless of that, she isn't sliding much higher than the bottom spot. So there's my opinion on Gawain. That's why she ranks at the bottom here. I'm hoping 100 chapters down the line, 200 chapters down the line, 300 chapters down the line, I'll be able to come back, do another video like this, and Gawain will be like number 2 or number 1. Heck, number 0 for all I know. But with that being the case, enough about Gawain. Let's hop right into number 3. Actually, you know what? Before we hop into number 3, another aspect about Gawain that I do like, and I do want to say this because I do like things about Gawain. I've done a whole bunch of complaining about Gawain, but I do like things about Gawain. I do like her mystery. The whole mystery of where she comes from, her direct relation to Arthur, her relation to Arthur's stepbrother, all that super duper interesting. And how she got Sunshine and what her deal is with Sunshine is also super duper interesting. Whatever hypothetical tie she has to Merlin as a possible mentor or even Granny. Like, there's definitely interesting things that can go on with Gawain. But also on that front, her mystery is simultaneously really interesting and yet the second least interesting mystery out of the rest of the group. Not only there's only one more person who has a less interesting mystery than her, but even then, that's only one thing that she has over the other character, who we shall be talking about very, very soon. So, those are my thoughts. Please leave me your thoughts down below. Let's move on to number 3. Yep. All right. Put your pitchforks down. Put your pitchforks down. Please let me talk. Let me explain myself. Let me explain it. Do not, please put the weapon down. Please. Let me explain. Yes, Tristan is at 3. That doesn't mean he's bad. He's just not the best. But let's talk about why. So, Tristan also is going to suffer a little bit from lack of screen time within Four Knights. He does get a little extra bonus points because he has a whole movie about him, and he's the only character to actually appear on screen in Seven Deadly Sins. So he even has a little bit of the last chapter of that to really set himself up. But unfortunately, that ain't enough. He is introduced in chapter 54 of Four Knights of the Apocalypse. He is the closing reveal of that chapter, and that's good. He gets about 6 more chapters than Gawain does in terms of general screen time. So he still is in under the 50 chapter mark for how much exposure we have to him. We could definitely bump him up higher than that, though, once again, because of the movie and because of his appearance and original Seven Deadly Sins. So he still suffers a little bit from what Gawain suffered with, on the idea that we just don't have much of Tristan. Like, sure, he's definitely been around in more chapters, and I'd say he's been a more pivotal part of more chunks of said chapters, but still, it's not too much. So in terms of a screen time kind of thing, I'm not as invested in Tristan as I am in other knights. I believe the time factor will definitely disappear the next time I do a video like this. Like, once we're 200 chapters deep, realistically, then I'm going to have over 140 chapters with all the characters involved in this list. So thusly, the time and investment thing will definitely disappear. By the time we're 200 chapters deep, we're probably going to be another 3 years in, which is... that's an existential crisis. But regardless, time is going to fly. But with that being the case, Tristan, he has less time. Thusly, I'm going to be less invested in him than I am in his compatriots that are going to be above him. But with that being the case, what else does Tristan have that keeps him from being all too high? Another thing about Tristan that is appealing to me somewhat, but not overly appealing, is his personality. Or lack thereof. Okay, now here's the thing. I'm not saying that Tristan's boring, but I'm not exactly saying that he's interesting either. All right, so the thing is, Tristan is cool. He's a cool cat. He's a nice guy. He likes to help his friends out. He basically is his mom and dad, like legitimately, down to every fiber of his being. He is just his mom and dad. A cool cat who likes to help people when he can. That's fine. It's not like directly concerning to me, like it is with Gawain and her less than savory intentions, to put it very nicely. So obviously Tristan's in a better spot than her, but on an interest front, on a personality front, there's nothing that exactly like reaches out through the screen and grabs me about Tristan. And while that's not a bad thing, it's not offensive, it's not gonna make me like bro. Like legitimately, him being a carbon copy of his parents is not the most interesting thing to me. And unfortunately, he takes a lot more after his mother, which means he doesn't have the same intrigue or like exact, how do I put this? What's the most eloquent way to put this? Swagger factor that his dad had. Like Meliodas from Rip had a certain swagger to him. Tristan, through being more like his mama, lacks that swagger. Elizabeth never necessarily had swagger. Even prime Elizabeth, or like I'm 2v1ing the Demon King with the love of my life kind of swagger that Elizabeth had, it never exactly hit the same. And that kind of swagger is what her son inherited until he goes Demon Mark, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. So his base personality is just kind of flat. And once again, it's not a bad thing, but it feels like he is a generic shonen protagonist. Like legitimately to the ultimate form of the word, he is the most basic and generic shonen protagonist ever, down to having a scary power that he can't exactly control, that drives him berserk, but gives him an extreme amount of strength in dangerous situations whenever his loved ones are hurt. Like, he is just bare bones the most basic interpretation of a character. Like, there's nothing, if you were to ask, or if you were to tell a random person on the street a character description of Meliodas and Elizabeth and ask them what their son would act like, that random person who's never read Seven Deadly Sins would give you this Tristan. And once again, that's fine. That's not exactly a bad thing, but it's not exactly a good thing either. He's just not that interesting to me. And unfortunately, another reason why he's not that interesting is because he is the least mysterious character on a general level. Notably, we know little to nothing about Gawain's backstory. No clue. We don't even know where Tristan found her. Like, maybe he went to the kingdom that she's from, or maybe not. We have no clue. We have no clue about her. She has a whole bunch of mystery built up around her with Sunshine, where she learned her magic, where hypothetically any of her relations to certain very important characters like Merlin and Escanor are, even a hypothetical relationship to Mael, considering her mastery over Sunshine at such a young age. Like, there are a whole bunch of questions up in the air about Gawain. Good. I love a good mystery. Lancelot. While we do know a lot about Lancelot and his origins, we have no idea what happened for a fat chunk of his life. Like, that stuff is just purely up in the air. What was the world beyond? What did he do there? How did he get such a legendary power that rivals the seven deadly sins so quickly? Why does he act the way he does after being the person he was? The connections he has, why he does certain things. The mystery of Lance, well, not as mysterious as Gawain, considering we know his mom and dad. That's still pretty darn mysterious. We still have a whole ton of stuff we can learn about Lance in terms of where his background is, where he comes from, his direct relationship with his parents. He is so much more up in the air. Same thing with someone like Percival. We essentially know nothing about Percival. We aren't... You know it's a problem when 99.9% of the fan base can't seem to agree on whether or not he's actually human, even though Nakaba has explicitly told us that he's actually just human. And the narrative has also hinted at the fact that he's human. But at the same time, the narrative hinted at the fact that he may not be human. And that's the most basic mystery about him. We still don't fully get his parentage and what that could mean. Sure, we think Ironside's his dad, but the timeline stuff that's gotten introduced with Deodra screws with that. So we don't even know if that's the case anymore, or 100% the case, whether or not that is entirely consistent. We have no idea about his mom. We have no idea why his magic is the way it is. We have no idea his real connections to Varghese and why Varghese had to take him away. Like, there's so much mystery surrounding Percy, and he's our main character. He's the character we've gotten definitively the most screen time with, and yet, in spite of that, he is inarguably the most mysterious character. And unfortunately, mystery brings intrigue. Like, at least for me, mystery is one of the main reasons why I do like characters. If I'm questioning what your character's next motive is going to be, or next move, and or questioning the history of your character, you've done a good job writing a mysterious character. And with Tristan, I know everything. Because the whole previous series was about Tristan and his family, and his origins, and his lineage. I know his grandpappy, and his grandmama. And I know his other, well, no, I don't know his other grandpappy and grandmama, but I know his mom and dad. I know their entire tale. And sure, maybe if I didn't read Seven Deadly Sins, I would have a much more like, whoa, this guy and his abilities, they're so wackadoodle-doo, they're so crazy. But unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to separate myself from my knowledge of Seven Deadly Sins. If you couldn't tell at this point, I'm in too deep, and thusly, Tristan has pretty much no mystery behind him. There's nothing that's like actively reaching out and grabbing you by the throat and be like, yes, be interested in this character in their next move. The only thing that hypothetically interests me about Tristan is his biology. But even then, I understand his biology. I even get why it's so finicky and haywire. Yeah, because light and darkness don't mix. And also he's human. So he has the like hypothetical best and worst combination of genes in the entire verse from some of the strongest creatures in the entire verse. Of course, his body's going to be a mess. And the ramifications of that, yeah, sure, they're interesting enough, but still, once again, they're kind of basic. And I think that's the biggest issue that Tristan has. He's just basic. That sounds so bad to say, but him being basic is something that's just how I feel about the character. And this unfortunately extends to his moveset too. Oh, he has light and dark powers. I know everything there is to know about light and dark powers. And admittedly, no, I don't. I don't know everything. But I know a lot. Because guess what? He's the child of the strongest demon and the strongest goddess to ever exist. And they did a whole bunch of light stuff and a whole bunch of dark stuff. And that's not even to talk about the numerous other members of their species that also did a whole bunch of light stuff and a whole bunch of dark stuff. And while I did give Tristan points in the Gawain section on how, like, well, he's using them in interesting ways, like falling meteors, twilight sparkle, whatever you call that attack, the big double-layered sparkle attack, yeah, he's using them in interesting ways. And trust me, I like the way Demon Mode uses darkness. When he's in Demon Market, he forms that sparking dark orb. I like it. It's really, really neat. But it's not exactly anything I haven't seen 100% before. Like, sure, falling meteors is something I haven't seen. Same thing with Twilight Sparkle. Just never seen those. But they aren't, like, too crazy in terms of uniqueness. I've seen Meliodas do the Dark Orb. I've seen Elizabeth use various attacks of more complexity when it comes to light, like the gigantic light whale she produces. It wouldn't be the first time that I've seen light and darkness be used in interesting ways by extremely powerful goddesses or demons. And sure, while him being a Nephilim is cool and all, we don't exactly get the benefits of a hybrid between a light and dark user, except for the fact that he can use light and dark. Tristan will probably become more interesting to me on a magical and combat front once he, like, you know, genuinely starts merging both sides of his magic. Like, he forms a new Twilight element, or starts using a variation of Chaos magic, because, you know, Chaos is a balance between light and darkness. So, Maybe then, but at least right now, nothing is shown us exactly, once again, reaching out of the screen and grabbing me by the throat. In fact, I would put Gawain's teleport ability above anything that Tristan has done because of how unique it is, and considering we've never seen something like it before. But even still, the 2-for-1 combo that you get with Tristan is something that's still a bit more interesting than what Gawain has to offer. Another thing about Tristan that's sort of keeping him locked in a little bit lower than his compatriots is, how do I put this? Let me put this nicely. Demon Mark Tristan is cooler than regular Tristan. And we get very little Demon Mark Tristan. So, like, I like Demon Mark Tristan. And mainly because it's just your cool, stoic, powerful anime dude. And I get it. Oh, so you don't like basic shonen protagonists, but you like basic, cool anime dude? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And unfortunately, the only reason I like it so much is because it works so well in contrast to base Tristan. Base Tristan is this nice, kind, cool, click your heels together, funny little guy. And Demon Tristan is, well, for lack of a better term, a demon. Like, he about that life, and I like that. That's way more interesting than his base self, but we got that for, let me go back and count the chapters myself. 6. 6 chapters. And he was important in, like, 2 of those chapters. 2 of the 6. Tristan himself has been in the overall narrative for what? 50? No, not even 50 yet. I don't think. Hold on, let me double check again. 48. He's been in 48 chapters since he was introduced in chapter 54, and we're now in chapter 102. If I did my math wrong, I am just a little bit dumb, but I think it's 48. So that means out of the 48 chapters he's been in, only 6 of those had Demon Mark as any sort of prominent factor in them. Tristan being in the mode. And that means he's only been interesting to me as a character through his basic evil side for about an 1/8 of his screen time. And that's me pretending that he actually appears in all of the 48 chapters he's been in since he's debuted. He has not been in all of those chapters. So he has even less time to be a character that I find interesting through his demon side in contrast to his regular side. So, yeah, to say the very least, he doesn't have much, at least not much to show for when it comes to where he stands as a character of any decent interest to me, because he's kind of boring to me. And to be fair, it makes sense. I'm not expecting Tristan to be some weird, crazy, out there, next level character in terms of his characterization. It wouldn't make sense for the kind of parentage and background and raising he's had. Heck, I wouldn't even think Lancelot would be the way he is without his trauma. So, thusly, Tristan, who's lived a relatively untraumatized life, would just kind of be a dude. It's not like I would be any more interesting than Tristan. I don't think I am any more interesting than Tristan, because I had a regular, chill life, too, so. It's not his fault that he's not that interesting to me, it's just that he's not that interesting to me, and thusly he's going to fall lower than his 2 compatriots, but above a character who, at times, really makes me want to reach in and, like, grab him by the head and just shake him and be like, stop that, bad, and, like, spray them with water like a cat. Like, legitimately, sometimes I'm like, Gawain, jail, and just bonk her over the head with a bat, because you know what kind of jail she needs to go to. But Tristan, he's kind of just like, I am neutral, I am nice, I am kind. Like, even his reaction to Jade's, ceasing of the living for being a childhood friend of Jade's, it wasn't necessarily that interesting. It was just so basic. That's the thing. That's the ultimate issue with Tristan. He's just so basic. It's to the point where I low-key, from a writing standpoint, understand why Nakaba didn't make him the main character. Because he used to be less interesting. Like, legitimately. And of no fault of his own. I'm not saying that Nakaba is doing something wrong here with how he's writing Tristan. I'm just saying that due to the fact that he's sticking to the most realistic route for Tristan and didn't give him any of that fancy trauma just yet, he's not necessarily that interesting for a majority of the time. And even when he is interesting, he kind of gets smacked. But with that being the case, I can definitely see Tristan getting way, way better in the character department. I can see him having character development. Once again, Meliodas and Elizabeth, they are on pack watch. In fact, they're pretty much laying in the role. Like, they're almost ready to be rolled up. I just need them to disappear, and then bada bing, bada boom. The character development will go crazy after that. Tristan having this normal, regular, happy life is obviously foreshadowing to the pain and suffering he's going to undergo once well, his parents disappear. So he can actually get a little bit of that good juicy trauma. Once he gets that in him, he's probably going to rise up the ranks. But right now, while his life is pretty much fine, sure, he lost a childhood friend, but by his own reaction, it obviously didn't mean too much to him. He's untraumatized. He's going to be less interesting than people who actually are traumatized. It'd be like that when it'd be like that sometimes. And I can't even like chalk any like negativity on his win record. Like unlike Gawain, Tristan's actually won a decent chunk of his fights. Like, yeah, he beat EO. Yeah, he beat his Chaos Commandment and Melascula. Yeah, he beat Despair Percy. What else has Tristan really taken other against... Even then, he beat Meligowan too when he went Demon. The only definitive, fat, hefty L he's been handed were technically 2. But even then, they were kind of in one consecutive sequence, so I don't really blame Tristan for that. It was against Arthur and Lancelot. 2 of the most powerful characters in the verse. I ain't gonna hold those L's against them. I just won't. Every other person he fights, he usually wins against. So I can't necessarily give Tristan any flack on the fighting front. But he doesn't have anything like fighting-wise that's better than the people above him. He just has better fighting stuff than the people below him. Rough stuff. Rough stuff. Very generally, it's just rough stuff. But if I had to make an early prediction, I presume Tristan is going to drastically rise up in the ranks of his fellow compatriots relatively quickly, if not relatively soon. Not soon, but quickly. Like, I think 100 chapters on the line, one of his parents is either going to be sealed or gone. Maybe both. If I just feel it. I don't know why. And if not by then, by the 300 chapter mark, something's definitely going to happen that's going to make Tristan an infinitely more interesting character, and that something is trauma. So once this boy gets some trauma in his system, then he'll probably be way more interesting to me. But for right now, the one word I can use to describe Tristan and why he's number 3 is that he's basic. He's inoffensive, and then he gets offensive when he's in Demon Mark, which is really, really cool. And for the rest of that, he's kind of just flatlining. He's not a character I actively dislike, but he's not a character that I like find myself actively liking either, like the 2 above him. But enough talk about Tristan. Let's hop right into number 2. It's my boy. It's my youngest son. It's the main character of 4 Knights of the Apocalypse. The Knight of Death himself. It is Percy. Now, I know, some of y'all may have predicted this from round start. Some of y'all may know me, and obviously since you know number 2, you know who number 1 is. But we aren't here to talk about number 1. We're here to talk about number 2 and why I think Percy is my second favorite of the 4 Knights of the Blah. And number 1. The biggest thing that's really carrying Percy for me is how well he's structured for the world that we are currently in when it comes to 4 Knights of the Apocalypse. Percy knows nothing about the world. Like, legitimately nothing. He doesn't know a demon from a realm. Thusly, bro's entirely kind of a blank slate in terms of his knowledge. He is very interested in traveling and learning more about the world. Hey, guess what we are? Whether we are Seven Deadly Sins fans who didn't get much exploration of the world that was established in Seven Deadly Sins, or you're a new 4 Knights reader who's very interested in learning about this world. We are also people who know relatively little, in the case of Seven Deadly Sins fans, and or flat out nothing, in the case of 4 Knights fans, about a lot of the areas we are going to within the world. And Percy fits into that with his intrigue and his love of travel very, very well. So he's just structured perfectly. Literally built perfectly for the story that Nakaba's trying to tell with 4 Knights. That's one major point in his favor. 2, he's not boring. Like, I feel bad calling Tristan boring, because Tristan's not boring. He's just flatline, but that is kind of boring. Percival is not boring. He is a goofy, funny, dumb bubblegum kid, and I love him. I love him for that. He's a wonderful little character. But the fact that he's so energetic, he's so hyper, he has such great connections with his friends, he has built such amazing bonds, and at the same time, guess what? He has something that Tristan doesn't have. Trauma. And guess what trauma does? It makes more interesting characters. I promise you, legitimately, you want to make your character more interesting? Give him some trauma. Give him some trauma and drizzle just a little bit of angst on there, and they will be 10 times as interesting as they were before. And that's the case with Percival. Not only do we get this happy-go-lucky, top of the line, I love the world and I want to explore it and learn everything about it kind of kid, we also get a guy who lost his grandfather on the day of his 16th birthday to his own father. His entire world was shattered in a matter of moments, and he had nothing that he could do but trek onward. or else he could lose his good mind. That's beautiful. I love that. I love that so much. It gives more interest and more weight to basic Percy. The guy who's happy-go-lucky and doesn't know much. Yeah, the trauma adds more depth to all those moments where he loves his friends, where he loses them, where he fears losing them, where he fears being alone. I love that. It gives a much more like generally interesting character than what the lower two have provided. And I think that's great. Another thing about Percy and the general thing that I really like about him is the fact that bro's mysterious as all get out. We know nothing about Percy despite having followed him for 102 chapters. He is definitively the character with the most screen time out of the four Knights of the Apocalypse. Even if I were to be generous and give Tristan his movie and give Tristan his appearance in original Seven Deadly Sins, that ain't enough. It just ain't enough. It's not enough to compete with Percival. We have followed this man for multiple years at this point, and yet we still don't fully understand his relationship to his father. He gets new relatives introduced pretty much every other month. We don't understand a singular thing about his magic. He doesn't understand anything about his magic. We don't fully understand his origins. Bro's mysterious as all get out, and I love that. Mystery draws me into characters. Mystery draws me into narratives. If I know everything about your story by the time I start it, unless it's like a video game that has really good combat, then I'm highly unlikely to like enjoy it. Or not just combat, gameplay. Because I'll admit, I watched a lot of Kingdom Hearts before I actually got to play it. Trust me. But even with that being the case, I still like Kingdom Hearts because of its gameplay. But when it comes to a narrative that comes in like manga form or book form or anything, if I don't have much mystery or intrigue behind a character or behind a story, I'm not necessarily going to be all too invested in it. But Percy is definitively the most mysterious character out of his group. You could combine the mystery of all three other four Knights of the Apocalypse and still have less mystery than Percy. We know where Gawain's magic comes from. We know where she could hypothetically have learned her magical abilities. We know where Tristan's magic and his abilities come from. We know where Lance and his abilities, well, not all of them. Not all of them. But we have a decent enough idea of where his abilities come from. Percy, once again, just an entire enigma. No clue. Can you explain Percy's magic? Because I can't. I have no clue. I don't even trust the darn thing, not to talk of explaining it. And that's fantastic. I love being in the dark. Which sounds so strange as a guy who writes explain videos, loves to talk about manga and anime, stuff like that. Like, trust me, I know it sounds strange coming from me, but that's some of the most interesting things. And Percy's general mystery is really, really cool. And speaking of his magic, it's also like the coolest magic. Like, hands down, verbatim, out of all of the magics we've seen so far for the four Knights, Percy's hope magic and Percy's despair magic are both individually more interesting than anything any other character has had to offer. It just be like that when it be like that, especially when it be like that. Mainly because his magic can literally do anything. And usually, I'm not the biggest fan of that. You will hear me complain to Kingdom Come in countless other series reviews or series discussions about magical powers or abilities of characters that allow them to do anything. It just feels a little bit pretentious to me sometimes. But considering, once again, the fact that Percy is a living, breathing, walking enigma, the fact that his magic can kind of just do whatever is really, really cool to me. And another thing that's really, really cool about the magic is how, once again, mysterious it is on its own. You can make an entire series of videos covering all of Percy's individual mini Percys and their development because they're all super duper strange and super duper intelligent, which shouldn't make sense considering they should all be extensions of Percy's own will and being, but they aren't. That mystery, once again, and I think that's the main thing that Percy has over his compatriots that drags him so much higher up the list. It's the idea that I have no idea. He's so strange in the best way possible, and the consistent discussion that surrounds him because we consistently learn more, yet it's crazy. Percy's one of the rare examples of where the more we learn about the character, the more questions we have. We get one answer and 3 questions every single time we learn something new about Percy, and that's amazing. I love that. It's what you really need out of a main character. Earlier, I mentioned how Percy is well structured with how Nakaba is building the narrative around exploration and world building in comparison to how he pretty much didn't do that in Seven Deadly Sins. But with that being the case, Percy also fits really, really well as a main character because you're always locked in. You're always invested. Bro is bro. Bro is him, in the sense that he carries a whole bunch of mystery with him as the main character. So despite spending so much time with him, we know so little, and that's great and very hard to do. Notably, isn't the first time Nakaba has done it. Meliodas is another character who, for the longest time, despite how much we know about him now, he was pretty much a living, breathing, walking enigma up until, like, chapter 300 or so, when we got the full explanation on his true magic and stuff like that. And even then, that's still kind of a mystery. But Percival, 100 chapters deep, and we know nothing about him, and that's great. And another thing about Percival that I like in comparison to his lower contemporaries is, once again, due to the fact that he's been around for over 100 chapters at this point, we've gotten a lot of fights with Percy. And they're all heat. They're all heat for various different reasons. Some of his one-on-ones are great. Like when he absolutely body-bagged Ardbeg's poor dog. Wonderful, wonderful. Painful to watch because I love doggos, but still wonderful. The many different jumps he's had, like his win against Ironside. Fantastic. Even though, you know, he kind of didn't win. That was Ironside running away. But hey, a forfeit's a forfeit. A dub is a dub. Him absolutely body-bagging and executing Talisker. Fantastic. Wonderful. Especially considering he used his own magic after getting an amp. And speaking of, his amps are really, really cool. Mainly because they're all like death amps. And death amps are really, really neat. I don't know. Like, legitimately, the near-death power-up being taken to the extreme with Percy is another interesting spin on an MC. Once again, I mentioned earlier how Tristan is kind of like your basic shonen MC. He fits within every single trope that you would hear someone say about shonen main characters. And that's it. He doesn't explore it in any unique or interesting way, at least in my opinion, up to this point. However, Percival is also like your generic crazy shonen MC, with a superpowered evil dark side and everything. But what Nakaba does to make Percival stand out is that he takes every single basic shonen trope and pushes it to its absolute insane limit. Like, legitimately. Oh, the main character will never die? Oh no, I'll have the main character die. They'll just come back to life. Because. What? That's crazy. Oh, you're telling me main characters usually get crazy next level amps whenever they're nearly on the brink of death? Okay, every time my boy gets on the brink of death, he's not only going to get a massive power up, but he's also going to heal himself and then beat up the villain. That's that extra step farther that makes it super duper interesting. Oh, your main character has a superpowered evil dark side that only comes out when its friends are in extreme danger? Okay, yeah. Your superpowered evil dark side may still speak English. Mine won't. It will go into a completely different language, start doing completely different powers and act as the complete opposite to the base kit of our protagonist, but still be a part of them. Once again, Nakaba takes those extra steps that he doesn't do with Tristan that allows Percival to be uber juber interesting, and all of his battles are super duper neat. And I think another thing that I like about Percival a lot is his dynamics with other characters. Unfortunately, once again, due to a lack of screen time for the most part, Tristan and Gawain are kinda lacking in character dynamics. Like, what are Gawain's dynamics? Other than, like, being down atrocious for the other two women in the group. I can't really tell you. I guess she has some respect for Tristan, maybe. And she thinks Percival's annoying, but we haven't gotten much of their bond. So, lacking on that front. Tristan, I mean, he likes his platoon, and he likes Lance, and they like him. No real interesting or memorable interactions on that front. And one of the few memorable interactions we do get are either a quick joke on Tristan's behalf from Lance and or in extra materials, which most people won't even read. And then with Lance, we'll talk about Lance. But Percy has a fantastic dynamic with literally everybody. Like, even people he doesn't need to have a dynamic with, except for, like, Isolde. I think Isolde's, like, Isolde and Jade. But Jade doesn't matter anymore. And Isolde is Tristan's love interest. So, obviously, Percival, the main character, can't slide in on that. But every other character, Percival has a super duper, ooper, juper interesting dynamic with. Him and Lancelot, the little brother, big brother trope, fantastic. Gawain and his interactions with her, one of the best twin idiot siblings dynamics that I've ever seen put to page. I love those two nutcases. Heck, Tristan and Percival, two people with dark and light sides. Really, really neat. Once again, much more neutral, and once again, kind of basic in comparison to a lot of the other dynamics that Percy has, but still a solid enough dynamic that is mainly bolstered by Percy. Percival and Donnie, the two idiot brothers. I love their dynamic. And Percival, I mean, they're kind of destined. And I think what Percival does to end also requires some jail time. Eh. But Nascine's and Percival, another wonderful dynamic. This guy has perfect connections with everybody. In a matter of a chapter, he developed a great bond with Meliodas too. So overall, Percival is a great character when it comes to working with and bouncing off of other characters, which is fantastic when he's the main character and he has most screen time. And thusly, he does a lot of interesting stuff within that screen time in terms of connecting himself to other characters, which gives him even more points because I love character interactions. As much as I would love a good solo story about a character going through it, and I've read a couple. Even with that, I like when characters have good relationships with other characters and interact in really unique and cool ways. That's great. That's fantastic. I love it. So Percy's just great. He's fantastic. And he still has such a long way to go. Once again, I don't think Nakaba's going to leave every stone unturned by the time we get to the end of the series. Heck, due to the fact that the mystery of him may chip away, and who knows, maybe I could get tired of his character, but I haven't gotten tired of it yet. Maybe he'll fall. But I'm assuming that he's going to stay around the same in terms of intrigue, mystery, power, uniqueness, and ability, but others will just get better. So I'm not sure where I see Percy going, except for getting hypothetically more trauma when his own friends start to perish. But even then, if he gets more trauma, if we really start drizzling more trauma on this boy, you see how much trauma you can fit in this kid? Tons. Legitimately, if we start doing that, then that's going to be even more interesting. I'm going to be even more excited to see where Percy goes from there. Because then we have extra trauma. And extra trauma is all the better. Just ask, insert spoiler here. So with that being the case, Percy just has everything in his favor. From the screen time, to the mystery, to the character dynamics, the character interactions, the character personality, the magics, the win-loss record, everything. Percy is just crazy good in literally every single metric that I could really place on and have discussed already. The only weaknesses I have with Percy is that sometimes he's just not that cool, bro. Sometimes he's not that cool, and sometimes he's a little bit too down atrocious. Percy, you and Gawain, you need to go to jail. And that jail starts with an H. So, bro, I think you need that, especially with all his interactions with Anne. Not the biggest fan of those. Once again, just not my thing. Another thing I don't necessarily like about Percy is how, sometimes you need jail. Sometimes you need jail or information. There's no way you should be that down atrocious making that kind of face when Anne's telling you to stop, doing things to other people. That's a little bit bad. And about the not that cool part, Despair Percy is the most, sweet mother mercy that was epic that I've seen so far with Percy. As cool as some of Percy's moments have been, they've been much more cool on a general character front. There's no, and once again, you can even check. That's the beautiful thing about having 102 reviews up so far. You can even check. I've geeked out over Percy and his abilities and his amps and all that, and I've been super excited for the character before, but there's never necessarily been a moment in this series where my jaw hit the floor and I was like, what in the world? This bro is so epic, he's so crazy, he's so cool. There never has necessarily been a moment like that. Do I think those moments can still happen? Absolutely, especially after a hypothetical time skip or after some more trauma. I could definitely see those moments popping off, but at least for right now, he doesn't have that extra cool factor. I would give that extra cool factor even more to characters like Gawain and Tristan, ironically enough. David Mark Tristan is just the coolest, feeding my teenage edginess kind of crazy character that I love. And even Gawain, once I get with the teleport strat, was super duper cool. Percy, as crazy as his magic is and as crazy as all that stuff is not exactly the most wild or crazy thing. And another thing that sort of leaves Percy lagging a bit in the dust in comparison to his other compatriots is that I kind of don't like his ideology. We need to save everybody. We can't do things executing people who try to execute us. Him saving Elgin and that being established after he definitively, Talisker was not alive. Talisker was definitely not alive after his battle with Percy. That's something I hope gets changed in the future. But those are his only weaknesses. Bro needs to chill out sometimes. He hasn't been uber super cool, and he needs to grow up a little bit. But the naivete is one of the best parts of his character, so I'm not exactly going to critique him too much on that. So overall, Percy, just a massive W character. Crazy writing, crazy potential for development, crazy mystery. Bro is buku bonkers in every single way, shape, and form. But obviously you know that he is not number one. So let's not waste any more time and get right to number one. Yeah, alright. I'm basic. I got on Tristan for being basic, but yeah, I'm basic. Yeah, Lance is number one. What are you going to do about it? It's my list. You knew it. You know what was going to happen. Who's the one character I've been glazing for 99% of the series? Like, legitimately, the moment they've been revealed. Is there been a single moment where Lance has appeared where I haven't glazed him? Like, legitimately, bro is no longer a glazed donut. He's not even a French cooler. Bro is literally just a wall of sugar. That's how much I've glazed him. Because he's that good. There's not a single problem. Okay, I lied. But that's not even his fault. That is not even his fault. So I'm not even gonna entertain the idea that there's a problem with Lance, because Lance gets forced to do dumb stuff by the plot. So I'm not gonna do that. But Lance is him. Lance is him. Thank you so much for watching. Okay, but now, obviously, why is Lance number one? Why is Lance number one based on the criteria that I've set in this very video? Because, being real with you, Lance has the second least mystery in the entire group, only really being ahead of Tristan in terms of more mystery because of the world beyond stuff. But other than that, we know his parents. We know the origins of his powers. We know fairy biology. So we know human biology. Like, we know all that. So there's no fancy mystery behind him. Why he has one of, if not flat out, the most basic and arguably the worst kit out of everyone we've seen so far. Percy's magic on its own is infinitely more diverse. Tristan's magic on its own is infinitely more diverse. Gawain's magic and the few spells she's shown plus Sunshine is infinitely more diverse. So how does Lance get up there? On top of that, how does Lance necessarily get up there as a character? He's a basic cool dude. Like, he's just cool, calm, stoic, and all that. If I'm getting on Tristan for being basic, how am I not getting on Lance for being basic? Because Lance is just a basic, cool character. There's nothing absolutely fancy or crazy about him. It's not like you can only get a Lance-type character in Four Knights of the Apocalypse. Lancers literally exist. Like, it's straight up in the title of the character. It's in Lancelot's name. So what is it about Lancelot that puts him at number one? How, Pencil? Just level it to me. And if you want me to level with you, be completely honest. Give you the true scientific reasoning why Lancelot really is just Timothy Herner personified. It's just that. He is him. The end of discussion. Okay. So first things first. He has just an amazing introduction. Notably, I probably should count Sin's introduction as his official introduction, but he even classifies himself as separate from Sin. Sin is a sort of a character he built. So him showing up at the 48 chapter mark and proceeding to casually dominate, straight up eviscerate, antagonize, and obliterate an entire platoon of chaos assassins on his own with his bare hands for the most part is absolutely bonkers. Okay, to be fair, he did use arrows like twice, but still, even so, his entrance is definitively the best. Like, as himself, particularly. I will include Sin. His Sin entrance is alright. But in terms of his entrance out of all the four knights, whether it be Percival, whether it be Tristan, whether it be Gawain, whether it be himself, he definitively has the best and most alpha Chad intro. And I'm sorry, it was cool. It was just cool. The Dark Talismans had been built up as a relatively decent threat. It took the entire main crew to their limits, whether it be Percy trying to fly and save and protect his friends after being debuffed, or Nasians taking an amp and stealing the magical ability of another, or Donnie literally reconstructing his magic on a mental level in order to actually utilize it against his opponent, or even Anne utilizing her ability to the highest degree we've ever seen it before. Yeah, these were a decent level of threat to the characters. Fittich had these guys shaking in their boots. The Knight of Death himself was shivering and his toes were quivering at the mere presence of Fittich behind him, who was casually perception blitzing them. And what does Lance do? Come out and curb stomp them so badly and proceed to make graves and absolutely vaporize another one of them. Crazy introduction. Number two, his character. Is he basic cool guy? Yes, on the surface. But guess what he has? It's the big T, ladies and gentlemen. He's got trauma, and we love some good trauma. So the thing is, we have a whole section of Lance's life that we know nothing about. Legitimately nothing. It was set up in his one shot, and it was paid off at his reveal, but we have no idea what actually happened in the world beyond. But we can tell based on how Tristan mentions that Lancelot doesn't want to talk about it, based on how powerful he has become, based on how Jericho and his relationship has changed, based on all of that, the trauma has deeply affected him. And I love some good trauma. He's not just a cool, edgy, top of the line warrior dude who's extremely powerful for no reason. He's a cool, edgy, top of the line warrior dude because he's traumatized. And I like that. That's really, really good. It adds layers to the character. And not only that, even though I will admit my least favorite part of Lancelot is the many cases he is forced into by Nakaba, listen to what I said. The many cases he's forced into by Nakaba. The whole Jericho thing, yeah, that's pretty rough. The whole Gwen thing, yeah, that's pretty rough. But they also bring out another side to his character. Not just the traumatized boy, but the traumatized boy who seeks love. The traumatized boy who wants to reconnect with the family he's lost. The traumatized boy that's forced into a scenario that he never wanted, all at the ripe old age of 16. You got to think about it. In fairy lifespan, especially royal fairy lifespan, Lance isn't born. Like legitimately. Gerhardi's like 4,000 years. How old is Gerhardi? Let me double check. She's approximately 4,200 years old. 4,200. Lance is 16. Let's do some quick math, ladies and gentlemen. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. My mathematician is out in the comments. I know you're there. But that would mean that Lance, at 0.38% of his lifespan, has lost 3 years of said lifespan to a world of who knows what, and is going through leading a group of other children into the battle of their lives based on a prophecy that he never even wanted, because of a mistake he made as a child into wandering into that world to try and impress his father and impress his family. Bro is suffering at a young age, and you can see it. So thusly, when he has those moments where he breaks, where the 16-year-old kid is revealed dealing with these full-grown women who want him for some reason, yeah, it adds layers, it adds dimension, it makes it so that the superficial, I'm cool, crazy, next level guy isn't all there is. And once again, due to his long-standing nature in the narrative, he has some of the best dynamics we've seen. Once again, I already praised Percy and Lance's dynamic. I love the big brother, little brother thing that they got going on. I think it's fantastic. Lancelot and Gawain, a duo I didn't necessarily expect to see too much of, but even the little tiny itty bitty glimpse we got of it. Lance knowing how to work Gawain and make her realistically do things that he desires because he understands how to work with her. Big brother, little sister kind of dynamic. I like that too. The equal brothers dynamic that we get with Lance and Tristan, another great dynamic. And heck, all the ties he has with the Percy platoon, whether it be his slight distaste or animosity towards Dottie and Dottie's general, wow, you're amazing, dude. Nasians and Lancelot sharing an even amount of respect for each other, or even Anne and Lance sort of contrasting each other as hypothetical leaders, all the way back when Lance was still Sin. That all is really, really good. It adds extra layers to Lance because you get to see him bounce off multiple different characters and have multiple different types of relationships with these characters, which is wonderful. Something a lot of the other knights, except for Percy, kind of lack. So he's going to get major points from that in the personality front. Another thing, the most basic moveset in the entire cast of 4 knights. Is this bad? For now, yeah, it is. But in comparison to his contemporaries, a very specific contemporary like Tristan, and another very specific contemporary like Gawain, he's taking abilities that we have seen before and taking them to the next level, which is what makes Lance super duper interesting to me. Heart reading. It was used like once in combat, and realistically, it wasn't really used in combat. That was by King against 4 Commandment Mael, and even then, he said his read is hard to figure out what was going on with him because he couldn't communicate directly. So that wasn't even really a combat use. Lance takes the heart reading ability and sends it through the roof, using it as actual precog and a way to win fights by simply reading his opponent's mind. Not only does he use it great on a combat sense, better than any fairy we've seen before, but he also uses it great in a reconnaissance sense, when he uses it to trick Molassiel and get information of her, where he uses it to interrogate and interview Fittich. All that. Fantastic stuff. The ability that was set up in 7 Deadly Sins that didn't get to be used too well, gets used very, very well by Lancelot. That's great. great. Another ability of the Fairy Clan that goes really extremely underutilized. The transformation ability of the Fairy Clan. Lance takes that and runs with it, whether it be using other forms to fly, using other forms to lower the guard of others, or literally using another form to infiltrate and train a whole group of possible knights like Percy and his platoon. With the usage of Sin, we didn't know who Lance was for a solid 47 chapters because he was hiding in fox form, a thing that we know other people could do, but they never did in the original series. Once again, taking abilities we've seen before to the next level. Tristan hasn't done that. Gawain hasn't done that. Lancelot has done that. Heck, the other major ability, Shining Road, a gigantic blast of light, admittedly isn't taking much to the next level. It's neat how he uses it, and the technique is pretty unique in and of itself in terms of the fact that it needs a weapon, but we did see Ludoshel and Margaret Body like fire a massive beam of light. Did they ever do it multiple times? No, but we've even seen Omega arcs that are way bigger than Shining Road. So I can't necessarily give Lance too much props for Shining Road, but the two evolutions of the fairy abilities are really, really good. I really like those, and it's taking things to the next step. And admittedly, that's his entire kit. That's all we got. He's an archer. That's neat. But we've seen archers before in Seven Deadly Sins. They're alright. So, I'll admit, on the ability front, he's not all too interesting. But on the combat front, not just comparing him ability-wise to his compatriots, but on the combat front, he's actually insane. Like, he's the only character so far to have a spotless win record. I say that. But, I mean, he didn't technically beat Arthur. That's another neutrality. Like, Arthur kind of just styled on him and ran. But, regardless, striking fear into the King of Chaos himself, crazy. Dominating Jericho, crazy. Dominating Percy, crazy. Well, not, to be fair, he didn't dominate Percy. But dominating Tristan, crazy. Like, bro has been doing nothing but taking massive W's. His introduction was a reverse gank. They tried to gank him, and he 1v4'd them into oblivion. That is crazy. Bro left the plot for a while, came back, took the second strongest knight, and put him on a t-shirt instantaneously with a wave of a broken blade. And a Shining Road. But still, a little bit bonkers, a little bit crazy, no matter how basic his kit is. Bro pulled up on the King of Chaos that was invading his realm and body-bagging all of his allies that tried to fight him, and was even putting work in against Meliodas in base, and then scared the dookie out of him so bad that he had to whip out the Chaos Schmied on him, and then even activate the Chaos Eyes for a 2-for-1 combo, and proceed to do absolutely no damage to Lance, and then, while admittedly not directly running from Lance, didn't fight him head on once Lance released his full power and actually started using his dominant hand. Crazy. Lance off-screened 5 demons. You know, the main species that were the antagonists of the previous series, off-screened by Lance. They didn't even get the dignity of being beaten on panel. Lance is dominant in combat. Bro is different. And that gives him a lot of bonus points in my eyes. Obviously, in a series of, combat and fighting, your character being good at combat and fighting is going to carry them a lot. And will even supplement their weaker moveset. And another thing that Lance has that, strangely enough, the other knights are lacking, despite them being the titular characters, is hype. I know it's weird to say, but like, him getting hyped up by Meliodas as having power so great no weapon can handle it is kinda crazy. Him getting hyped up as the only one who could hypothetically defeat Arthur by Tristan, kinda crazy. Him being hyped up by literally everyone who sees him because he's that Himothy is kind of crazy. Like, no other character has really gotten that up to this point. And sure, they've gotten, like, general hype. Like, oh, you need to be careful around Percy because he's one of the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse. You need to be careful around Tristan because he's one of the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse. You need to be careful around Gawain. She's one of the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse. But no, this is specifically Lance hype. People were running from him because he was a 7 Deadly Sins level threat before he was even revealed. That's how hyped up Lance was as an individual, and he hasn't let us down on the hype. Gawain hyped herself up. She failed. Verbatim. Simple. Clean as that. Tristan hyped himself up. Failed. Simple. Clean as that. Percival, he never necessarily hyped himself up, so he has no room to fail. So he's doing perfectly good, but he doesn't have much hype behind him. Lance has the hype and lives up to it. That's a hard combo. That's a hard deal to kind of make it through, but Lance does it, and he does it with style. with swagger, the exaggerated swagger of a fairy teen, if you will. That's how different Lance is. And that's great. It's hard to do, once again, and I do think it does have some negative effects on the narrative. But even with those negative effects, when I'm talking about ranking these characters individually, they still get all the bonus points from that hype, from their execution, from their success. And Lance has realistically had nothing but successes. The only issue I could hypothetically have with Lance is literally plot-induced stupidity. That's it. That's it. It's only plot-induced stupidity. Because I believe slaying all of those Chaos Knights who could have been easy tickets to Camelot, not realistically just casually body-bagging Jericho as he easily could have. I know it's his master and everything, but still not doing that. Letting Gwen go, and on top of that, risking the demons, perishing immediately. We're lucky that Io managed to survive and show up in 102. All of that is a little bit dumb. But dumb and out of character. Well, no, I'll give the Jericho thing. That's pretty in character. But the Gwen thing, unbelievably stupid. But that feels like the plot itself holding Lance back from performing as optimally as he usually does. But other than a couple plot force blunders, Lance hasn't fumbled, and he has every other thing that the other characters have, even if in lesser degrees. But in those lesser degrees, he does better than some of these other characters. That's what makes him my favorite. It's that cool factor, plus the success, and literally every other area. Lance almost never fumbles, and that's fantastic. Unfortunately, though, the one thing I do see is Lance hypothetically losing this #1 spot. Percy, as much as I was hyping him up and gassing him up, he was very close to taking this top spot. If Percy had a little bit more cool factor to him, he would be #1. And with that being the case, I can see Percy getting some cool factor. I can see Tristan getting some trauma. I can see Gawain being less down atrocious and getting more backstory. I can see all these characters getting more complete stories. And unfortunately, Lance, with how good he is now, he has, unlike the others, he doesn't have much higher to go, realistically. And the more we chip away at his mystery, the less intrigue is going to be there with the character. And I'm not sure how much extra trauma we can give him. Obviously, offing his parents, but okay. Fine, but how much more trauma are we going to really give the boy? Like, legitimately, he's already in a pseudo-traumatized state already. So, I'm not sure. Lance is in a very precarious spot on this list. With his cool factor, with his solid factors and everything else, he's holding this top spot for now. But 100 chapters on the line, 200 chapters, who knows? Things can always change. Alright, those are my thoughts. This is my ranking. Please tell me yours in the comment section down below. If you made it all the way to the end of this super duper long video, like, geez, this is ranking 4 characters. How did I talk for over an hour? But regardless, if you made it to the end of this super duper long video, please don't forget and leave. That's the thing, I'm not hungry, but I am a little bit thirsty. This was a lot of talking. Leave purified water down below if you made it all the way to the end of this video. Let me know if you made it all the way here. If you did, thank you. Glad you guys enjoy listening to the content enough. Please leave your own rankings, leave your own reasons for why you rank them in a certain way down below. And thank you guys so much for watching once again. Please remember to leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe. And make sure the notifications to miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do a Patreon below. Each one videos as one, cut them one, down month. This is the videos, early content, and more. You also now become a member of the channel for as 3 as month to get the same perks and more. Now, thank you guys so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is Dago the Pencil, writing off.